Hey there, welcome back to the show. We are all about turning tragedies into triumphs and learning from others how they had struggles that led to their success. And today we have someone that has definitely made the most out of their second chance in life. We have Doug Bopst here, once a full-blown drug addict and felon. Now he's passionate about helping others get healthy every day. He is a best-selling author. He's got a successful podcast that's one of the top podcasts, entrepreneur, an award-winning personal trainer on a mission. Y'all, he's been featured on just about everything from the Today Show, the Ritual Podcast, Men's Health, Gold Coast, Fox, ABC, and his story is absolutely incredible. He's become a dear friend of mine, and I am so happy you're here. I'm so happy to see your face, Doug. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It means a lot, and I'm very honored to kind of return the favor. I had you on my show, and now being on yours, it's incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we get either on the phone or on Zoom or, start texting and we just talk, I think, because we have so much in common. And your story really touches my heart because I have my baby brother who is in jail. He's actually on death row in Texas. And so when I learned about your story, I think I learned about you through my friend Erica Lippy, but then I listened to your interview on the Rich Roll podcast because I'm a huge fan of Rich Roll also. And I was like, oh my God, here is somebody who really turned what could have gone one direction and been the end of his life. And now you are not only turned your life around, you are helping so many people turn their lives around too. Can you share with us, just tell everybody a little bit about where you were and how bad it was and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, it's funny the time we're in now. As we're recording now, we're in the middle of this
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, right? And I think a lot of people now they're seeing they're in some mental prison, they're in some emotional prison. A lot of things are coming full surface that they may not have had, or that they knew they had, and it's now they're being forced to look at it. And for me, I was in physical prison, mental prison, emotional prison, spiritual prison back in 2008 when I was incarcerated on felony drug charges. And, what led me to that was it was a result of a lot of undealt with trauma from my childhood where I was bullied. I suffered all kinds of abuse. I had this notion that I would never be able to receive love. I was overweight. I was made fun of. I was told I looked like I had Down syndrome, like all these things that I thought there was this something wrong with me. So I turned to drugs and I started smoking pot when I was 14 and then started selling it to support my habit. And then I couldn't get high enough from that because what happened was when I started smoking it, I felt like this monkey come off my back. Like I didn't have to worry about my problems. I could be myself. I didn't have to worry about whether I was going to get married or what I was going to graduate college or all these things that I just had in my mind because of the story I was telling myself based on the view of other people onto me. And then I just got to a point, like I said, I couldn't get high enough off the pot. And so I was like, well, what am I going to experiment with next? And I turned to cocaine and started snorting like an 8 ball a night of cocaine. And then that turned into painkillers. And meanwhile, along this, I couldn't maintain a job. I was either fired or I quit from like 21 jobs by the time I was, in my late teens, early 20s. And when I started experimenting with painkillers, I didn't know where that was going to take me. And a 5 milligram Percocet led me to, 400 milligrams of oxy going up my nose every day.
Wow.
Yeah, and as I look back to like why I was doing it, it was 100% self-medicating for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I hit a point in my life where I thought I was going to be dead by the time I was 25. I didn't have any hopes or dreams of growing up. I didn't think I was going to be anything out of anything with my life the way it was, and I just was like trying to just completely numb myself to the greatest ability I could. So through all
Yeah,
that,
and that works until it doesn't. I mean, because I've been there. I've been
yeah,
sober now for 4 years, and that's exactly kind of what I was self-medicating too for physical pain. Well, and then I realized emotional too. But it does work. I remember thinking, "Oh, wow, this is awesome. Why didn't the doctor just tell me to drink?" Because it numbs out everything. And I remember thinking it's not the healthiest thing to do, but it works for now. And
yeah,
then, like you said, it worked until it didn't, and you had to go somewhere to try something out. And I've always heard, and I truly believe this because I've seen it. I didn't go to jail yet, but it alcoholism, drug, when you're a drug addict, it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone, and it either will lead you to, death, prison, or maybe an insane asylum if you're lucky, maybe.
mhm,
But so yeah, I agree. I can completely relate to that. But who would have thought you would be snorting that much those pain meds every
yeah,
day
it's a
and
lot.
live through that?
Yeah, it's a lot, and I think I battled with anxiety and depression growing up, just because I mean I grew up in a divorced home, and I had a lot of the other stuff go on that I was sharing, and so I just didn't want to think about anything, and the painkillers for me just completely like did just that. And but because to support all of my habit, because people always are like, well, how did you afford that? Well, I sold a bunch of drugs, and I sold a ton of pot. I sold, I mean, a couple pounds of pot a week, which is a couple $1,000s, right? And um, what ended up happening was one day everything kind of came to a head, and I had a busted headlight that I'd been meaning to fix, and it was Cinco de Mayo 2008, and I'm riding around with a few of my friends to go pick up some pills, and I flashed my high beams at this cop who was running radar at night. He pulls me over. One thing leads to the next,
You
and
flashed your high beams, what, so your light
my
would work?
yeah, which was like the
Oh,
last thing you're supposed to do, right? So I high beam
oh.
the police officer. He pulls me over. One thing leads to the next, pulls me out of the car, searches my car, finds a half a pound of pot, $2,000 in cash, arrests me, charges me with a felony drug charge, intent to distribute marijuana. So I get locked up that night, I get bailed out, and the next day I just continue on my same path. So I was awaiting trial, court. Like I got arrested in May. I went to court in September. It's a process when like you have a felony because you got to get arraigned, you got to go to circuit court. It's not just as simple as like a charge and you go to court. And I just kept on my same path. I just kept doing drugs, kept being
That
like,
wasn't enough. That didn't scare
no.
you
Well,
enough.
I was like, I wanted to pretty much, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to die, I'm going to go out doing drugs because I'm sure you can relate to this. Our friends we used to like idolize the guys who died at 27, like Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morris, like all these musicians who died at a young age. We are like, well, that's the cool thing to do. And so when I went to trial, September 2008, when I went to court, wasn't like I guess you call it a trial, right? That I was facing the maximum sentence was 5 years, and the judge, kind of came to me and he's like, you know what, like I'm going to make an example out of you, but I'm going to give you a chance to save your life. And he said to me, I'm sentencing you to 5 years, but I'm going to suspend everything but 90 days, meaning like if I messed up at any point during my 5 years of probation that he gave me as well, I could serve the full 5 years. So 5 years probation, 200 hours community service, all kinds of fines and drug classes. But he said, Doug, if you complete everything without messing up, I'll take the felony off your record. And
Wow. And
yeah,
what state was this in?
in Maryland. So
So they're
uh,
a little bit nicer in Maryland, man. In Texas, they don't mess around.
yeah, I can imagine. I probably would have been drunk. Right? So um, and then so like I got charged and I got this, and I had like I was like, oh, whatever, like I'm gonna die when I'm by the time I'm 25 anyway. I'm gonna get out. I'm high in court. I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna leave court, get high. And so I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, because all my family's like, Doug, he's giving you a chance to get the felony conviction off your record. You know how important that is? And I was like,
That's huge. I
right.
know because my oldest brother has a felony record. So my baby brother's in jail. My oldest brother has a felony record, and it's impossible or nearly impossible to get a job when that's on your record.
Yeah. So I had all that going. And I reported to jail about a few weeks later. It was a week after my 21st birthday, crying. And of course, I hadn't stopped using drugs. So I went in, and the last thing I did, like I almost was late saying goodbye to my mom, my dad, my family to like report to jail because I was snorting like a couple 100 milligrams of oxy before I went in.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I almost was late, almost missed, reporting. And then I got there and kind of all hell broke loose because the detox started. It was 3 weeks of hell, vomiting, uncontrollable shakes. I felt like I was trying to crawl out of my own skin. Just massive pain and aches because I was just so used to being like sedated and numbed with like
I
these pills.
mean, you could have died from the detox. There are
it, it was rough. And my cellmate, which is where things changed for me, was the one who forced me to start exercising. And I remember like, at one point he literally forced me to start exercising. And I remember at first he was like, "You're gonna start working out with me when you get through this detox." I was like, "Have you seen me? Like, I could be a model for Pillsbury. I'm like fat. Like, who am I to like start working out?" And then I remember that night, like the first night he like brought this up to me, he was like doing thousands of push-ups, running all kinds of laps in the common area. And after his encouragement and like nudging me every day, I was like, I finally decided to give it a try. I remember getting out to do a push-up, couldn't do a push-up, could barely walk, could barely do one for my knees. And with his encouragement and training me in there every single day, I was able to do a set of 10 push-ups and run a mile by the time I left. And that's what really catapulted my journey was that transformation. And it wasn't the push-ups and the sit-ups, it was how they made me feel. It was the being
Mm-hmm.
able to get comfortable being uncomfortable, setting and achieving a goal, being consistent with something, having like something to shoot towards. All these things I never really had in my life. And then also having like some of the unconditional love from somebody who had no skin in the game as far as my life, like really like challenging me and being like, come on, like I'm gonna hold your hand and walk you through this journey. It's kind of like that poem where you see kind of God who's like the footprints in the sand poem. You know what I'm talking about? Where
Mm-hmm.
God's like dragging the person through, and and
And then
that's,
there's one set of footprints, and
yeah,
that's when God says, "That's when I was carrying you."
exactly. And that's kind of what I felt like was happening in jail. And then he gave me a workout plan when I left, so I never forget where I came from, and I keep it. It's like 15 feet from me right now, so I never forget like where I was then. And
Do
so it
you
also
still keep in touch with him?
he actually called me yesterday, like very
Really?
very randomly. I was like, dude, because yeah, I've been trying to get him on my podcast because I'm like, I always tell the story from my perspective. I'm like, I want to get you on so you can tell it from your perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
that we've been in and out of touch. I mean, just because just things happen, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he ever got on a completely straightened path. So,
Yeah.
but I never
Well,
forget
I
him.
want to go back to what you said a little bit because
Yeah,
you
yeah,
said some key things that I think are really important that got
yeah.
you through.
So
You had a purpose.
right.
You had something to look forward to or to strive towards. So you set a goal and you weren't stuck looking backwards, which I think a lot of people get caught up in. I
Mhm.
know I did at one point. Instead, you were like, okay, maybe I can do one push up. Maybe today is going to be two push ups. You had accountability. You had somebody there to hold your hand through the whole process. And you found a way to, you were uncomfortable. And each day you were like, okay, it's going to be okay. I will get through this feeling uncomfortable. And then I will gain confidence from it. And something big that you said was it wasn't just the physical doing the push ups or running, it was how it made you feel.
Mm.
And that is why I work out exactly that, because how it makes me feel. I just had a conversation with my dad last night who was really down because, he's by himself. He's in Texas and they're all quarantined too. And he lives by himself. He had a major back surgery. He's got a lot of back issues and he tends to suffer from anxiety and he gets really, sad because he was a stud, man. I think he still is a stud, but he was like truly like the player driving the Trans Am. All the chicks wanted him. And now he struggles because of pain and he can't do the physical things that he used to do. But I was like, Dad, you gotta move. You gotta move your
All right.
body. You gotta exercise and do what you can. And he's like, but I can't really move my legs. I can't work out my legs anymore. And I'm like, I get it. I was stuck in a bed for 2 years in a wheelchair and on crutches, and I couldn't do that either, but I still moved. I had a pull-up bar in my hospital bed. I had dumbbells. I was like, you move just so you can push yourself up off the floor if you do fall, get your upper body strong. And I said, for the main reason is to feel good. You need those endorphins. And it changes the chemistry of your brain. For me, it was always my drug of choice, and when I got into trouble with drinking, it was because I wasn't able to run anymore, which was my therapy. And I substituted, and I was like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. This is not the path that I'm meant to go down. Well, so how long were you in jail or prison?
A little less than 90 days jail. I mean, it was in a county detention center. And I mean, but when I say prison, I mean like my mind as far as where I was. I mean, my self-esteem was definitely in the negatives. My self-worth, who I saw in the mirror was, just this big piece of junk that was a failure and it had morally just given up on himself, years prior. And it was just really somebody that just was never going to amount to nothing.
Did you read books while you were in jail?
I did, but nothing. I read books and when I was in jail, and I also did some things like for like positive affirmations for my mind. Like I had to really change how I talk to myself because for the longest time I was telling myself, you're fat, you're never going to make anything, you're this, you're that, like you're a loser. And I had to change that because it really starts with the mind and how you talk to yourself. And it's not like it doesn't happen overnight. It takes like time, and like it took like weeks of being consistent with that and walking with my chest like puffed out and not like hunched over, and then doing things like reading different books in there on just spirituality, and I was reading the Bible, and I was reading just some novels. I mean, I was just getting my mind off of like just thinking about the whole thing, the whole aspect of being in jail. I had a routine. I had things to look forward to. Like in the morning, we would, do a lot of calisthenics, and then I would have the evening look forward to my run, and then we'd have time during the day where we would play chess and Scrabble, like just like that way, like every few hours, I had something to look forward to. So it made the time pass. So I wasn't just sitting in my cell, like staring at the ceiling the whole time. Right. So,
But I think that's incredible that you made it to where you looked forward to it, because that's something that I would love if people could change, instead of thinking of exercise as punishment for how unhappy they are about their bodies, or that they feel like they have to do it, that it's something that they get to do. It's a reward, really, that you are able to do these things. And, I would love if more people looked forward to it. And if you can't, like there are days where I'm like, oh, I don't really feel like working out, but I think about how it's going to make me feel afterwards. Because whoever leaves a workout and they're like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Like never. Like,
oh, you're right. And I think it's like there's no greater expression of self-love. I mean, everybody talks about self-love, right? And love than taking care of your body. And it doesn't have to be like, for me, it was just being able to do a push-up from my knees when I started. It wasn't even about like, oh, doing 100 push-ups or running like a 5K. It was like, hey, dude, get down and do like 3 push-ups from your knees. And that was a struggle for me back then. And it taught me a lot about grit. And I know you talk a lot about, obviously, about grit in your messaging. And it taught me about just getting through stuff at all costs and doing whatever it took to become better. And I literally every single day in there committed myself to being relentless every single day, to winning that day. And then in hopes that I would get the opportunity to live a better tomorrow, because it wasn't guaranteed. Like, cause it wasn't. And I just knew that if I went the opposite way, and I did nothing to better myself, if I didn't adapt a growth mindset when I was in there, if I didn't like look at my failures as opportunities to get better, that I automatically would lose. And the mindset shift just came because I hit a point where I was like, wow, like up until this, and I'm like pretty logical and pragmatic. So I'm like, oh, so up until this point, I blamed everybody else for my problems. I haven't exercised. I've been eating like shit. I have been treating myself and others poorly. And I'm sitting here, I've had 21 jobs, I'm incarcerated on felony drug charges, and I have no hope in my life. So there's got to be something that has to change.
Mhm.
And the common denominator and all that was me. And
Right.
that's kind of what started everything. And it's hard. I think it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm the problem. But it's also positive and be like, wow, like I'm the problem, yet I'm also the solution.
It sure is. And it's, you talking about that right now, with what's going on in the world today, I think so many people, because we're in this pandemic, and so
Yeah.
many people are angry or upset or they're in fear. And I was sitting in my office and my husband came in and he was like, "Oh my gosh, this person has really lost their mind. You should see all the hate they're spreading about um, Trump and China and all this stuff." And I'm like, well, it's an opportunity for us to ask ourselves, are we placing judgment on them, or what's our part in it? Because, I think that right now a lot of people want to look for somebody else to blame. And I love that you said, the common denominator was me. I had to look at my part in it. And I think if we could all, as hard as it may be sometimes, look at our part in every situation, then everything would be so much easier. Instead of always pointing the finger at everybody else, going, okay, what's my part in it? How can I better myself? How can I better the situation? Sometimes there's one of my favorite prayers is the serenity prayer. And I actually have it in my room so I can see it. And it's like, really taking acceptance, knowing when we can't change something, um, asking for help. And it sounds like you did all of those things.
Well, yes, I did. And I did and I didn't. I mean, I did. You're right. I think, but it took some time. It took my cellmate like really looking at me and giving me some tough love and being like can I cuss on here?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. I just want to make sure because I mean, this is just how it was. And this is back in 2008. It was very real to me. And I want to preface this, but before I say what I'm about to say, it's not the words that really did it for me. It was how he phrased it afterwards that helped me experience a true transformation. He said, like, I was just sitting there one night and it was before I committed to really exercising where I was like, God, man, my parents, they got divorced and this. I was picked on in school and this and that. And I got robbed for drugs. And he was like, quit being a bitch. And I was like, what? And I just was like, did I just get called a bitch in jail? Right. And like, where I grew up, being a bitch, you don't want to be called that. And especially in jail. Right. And then, but what he said to me was what changed my life. This is how I use everything even today is you can be a man or you can be a bitch. And he said, most people will be a bitch and cry in the corner, say, woe is me. They'll wait for their parents to fix their problems or wait for this or that. And they won't get anywhere. He's like, you can be a man and own your mistakes, own your choices. He's like, you got yourself here. He's like, no matter what. He's like, plenty of people's parents got divorced. Plenty of people are bullied. They didn't all go to jail. He's like, you're here. He's like, what are you going to do to change? And I felt empowered, right? I felt empowered. And that was like really one of the big turning points was I was like, you know what? Like as much as
Because you realized you had a choice.
I did. And what's funny is that a lot of times when things like that get said to us, we hate that person in the near term, but long term we love it because it was what I needed to hear. I didn't want to
Mhm.
hear it, but I needed to hear it. And so, yeah, I mean, as I got out, I was on a mission to change. I was like, how can I ever repay you? And he was like, well, don't fuck up and pay it forward. And I was like, huh, all right. So he gave me the workout plan. I would do it like I was living with my grandparents. I did it in their basement. And I was outside running. And I remember my grandparents, like, they came home and they were like, yeah, we saw you running outside. We were wondering what was going on. And
They're like, what are you running from? It's probably
yeah,
their first thought, like, uh-oh, he's at it again.
no,
Running.
they could tell like there was a shift because when I got out, everyone was, I never went to rehab. They were always like, people were like, you need to go to rehab. And I'm like, screw rehab. I found fitness. And I didn't believe that I was going to make it. I didn't. There was like maybe like 3% of me, 10% of me, whatever, that thought I was actually really going to make it, out on the other side. But I knew that I had to almost fake believe it. Like I had to live as though I was going to make it. Otherwise, I'd be screwed. And that was like my mentality was like, I can't see light right now. but there's going to be light. I don't care. That's just what I believe. That life's going to be better in 3 years from now, 3 days from now than it is today. So I just was on a mission, and I changed the way I ate. I would spend more time with my grandparents at home. Like, we would watch the Food Network and Dancing with the Stars. I kind of taught myself how to cook, you know, but by living there and, you know, being around my grandma who cooked and watching, like I said, the Food Network, and just developed some new skills. I read a lot. I went back to school, and
Wow.
decided to pursue my 2-year degree. Yeah, which was like a big deal for me because I went to college for like, I don't know, like 4 years, and I still was like a freshman. So it was a big deal for me to do that. And then I lost a bunch of weight, and the whole mindset shift started to really transform into other areas of my life where my old friends were like, I have nothing against any of my old friends, nothing. If any of them called me right now today, texted me, I still talk to some of them. No hard, no. It's just I began to think like I had nothing in common with them anymore. Like there was
Mhm.
nothing. I couldn't like have anything in common. So I just was like, eventually I just kind of left, and started developing other friends and other different groups, and just realized how much the power of inner circle was, like how much it was important to surround yourself with like-minded people that have common features and not common pasts, that challenge you to be your best self no matter what, like your ride or die. And then I saw the weight loss come, like I lost 50 pounds, and I was like, well, crap, if I can do this, I want to teach other people how to do it. So what did I know that this boy, I call myself a boy back then because I still was like young, I was 21, 22, was now going to be wanting to pursue a career in personal training. Right. And I became a trainer. It's been about 9 years now, over 9 years. And I just found a new high. I found my ability in wanting to help people use fitness to change their lives in the same way it helped me become something I wanted to have a massive impact in the world. And then I fell in love with it, and I built a really successful training business, and time kind of flew by. And at this
Well,
point,
let me ask you though. So I have another friend of mine, and I think you may know her, Jen from Resurrection Me on Instagram. I'll
maybe,
introduce you. She's amazing. She was on the True Grit and Grace podcast, and she went to jail for drugs, and she got sober in jail. Um, what would you say to somebody who is not in jail yet,
right.
or not in jail, and they're doing drugs, or somebody that may be listening right now and they might think, I may have a problem,
Mm,
might be taking too many pain pills, or I might be drinking a little bit too much? Because right now, did you know, I'm sure you know this, but alcohol sales have spiked up because
50%.
everybody, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's
And
the one thing I'm like wondering. I'm like, all right, you can't go to the gym, but you go to the liquor store. Like, how does that make sense?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
isn't that crazy? And then my daughter and I went for a little bike ride in the neighborhood the other day. And in California, there's pot shops everywhere. We
Mm,
drove by, happened to drive by the pot shop. There was a line down the street. I kid you not, down
wow.
the street for pot. And I was like, wow, like everybody's drinking and smoking. What would you say to somebody who's struggling right now, and they maybe don't have any hope, but they have that thought of, oh my gosh, I think I have a problem, but I don't know how to quit? Because you had the ability to, really almost kind of be forced into fitness to kind of help you, transform your life and then quit doing drugs. What would you suggest to somebody who wants to quit and they don't know how?
It's, I get asked this a lot, and something I answer varies, and there's a lot of different things I tell people, and just depending on the person. I mean, I think the first step is always just acceptance, just knowing that it's okay. Right. I think so many people, they're ashamed to admit it. They're ashamed to raise their hand and say, wow, I've been drinking every day for the last 2 years, 3 years, and it's gripped a hold of my life. I
There's
think
a
a lot,
lot of shame that goes with that.
yeah. And I
For
think,
me, anyway.
yeah. And I think just knowing that it's okay and that you're not alone, because
Mm-hmm.
I think anytime we're going through something, a challenge, a moment of adversity, um, a failure, our biggest um, trial through that isn't the instance itself, it's the response to it. It's how are other people going to view me? How it's,
Mhm.
what am I going to do? So acceptance, know you're not alone, and get involved with a community of people, right?
Mhm.
I think having a community of people, whether it's, I mean, for me, I was in jail, so I had a community of people in there to help me. And plus I was in a place where I had no other choice, but I'm talking as if I had a choice and I was out. Looking back now, was get involved with the community and like really start to ask yourself some questions. Like, is what I'm doing right now like aligned with where I want to, the person I really want to be, my higher self, who I want to be? And then trying to like figure out like some ways, some things they can do in the medium. So like focus on getting strong, like adapting, like doing what you need to do to like change your brain chemistry and rewire your thinking, your coping mechanisms. Like one of the things I actually was telling one of my coaching clients who's in recovery, who's having trouble with some triggers, I said, I don't care if you want to use again or whatever. If you end up like, before you do, go for a 20-minute walk or run and do a set of like 100 push-ups. Do 100 push-ups,
Mhm.
then reevaluate. Change your thought patterns, change your habits, right? Because sometimes that instance to want to use again is just instant and you want to feed that craving right away. But there's so many
It,
other things.
yeah, it's the
Try and make
same
it
with
the best.
any kind of bad habit. They even say, what I've heard with food, instead, go brush your teeth. Or
Yeah.
if you can, and that's the same thing Mel Robbins talks about too, is breaking that habit 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 right away, changing that thought pattern. How do you suggest people find a community?
So
Like
that's
if
what I
they
was,
are feeling alone, or especially now, if a lot of people are being told not to leave their house, or they're
it,
introverts, or they're just like, I don't know how to find a community. What do I do for that? What would you suggest?
well, I think there's a few ways, but it just starts with one person. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's just reaching out to somebody who you trust 100% with everything, that you can just say, hey, like, can we talk for like 10 minutes, and just saying, like, I don't feel comfortable. I'm ashamed. Like being like open and opening yourself up. And it might not be easy. But what I'm saying is that's why you want to find somebody who you can really trust. So you have that connection. And just tell them like, I've been this, that, and the other. I feel scared. I feel this. I feel that. And I think just opening up and sharing like that
Mm-hmm.
opens like Pandora's box to be like, all right, what's next? And then from
Yeah.
there, like, maybe that one person then can lead you to another person or
And I want to say too, if you reach out to someone, if you're listening right now and you're like, okay, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to reach out, and you reach out to somebody and you're expecting them to be there for you, and they're not, because that happened to me where I reached
yeah.
out and I thought, I'm going to have some help.
Mhm.
And that person couldn't help me. So that didn't stop me. I had to summon up all the courage again, because it takes a lot of courage
Well,
when you're
yeah,
struggling and you realize that something is definitely wrong. Like I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I knew that I desperately needed help. But desperation can be such a gift, because it gave me the willingness to do whatever I could to get better. So I was like, okay, that person is not there for me. I need to go to someone else. I had to share my innermost demons and secrets with someone. And then when you find someone who has been through some similar things, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And they
right.
got through it. I know I can get through it too. It gives you that glimmer of hope.
Yeah, and I think even now in the times we're in, it's tough, right? Like, and knowing it is going to be tough, and like you said, getting told no or having somebody not listen to you, it's going to happen, and just almost expecting that to happen, it not is probably somewhere where you kind of need to be with your mindset, because it's just the way it's human nature. And I think now more than ever, there's so much more access to online communities than there ever has been in recruiting.
There is. I
And
just interviewed someone on the podcast, Kate B, and she's got an online program. Holly on Instagram. I don't know if you know who she
I know
is.
Holly and Laura McCowan, Laura's.
Yeah.
So I think people now, especially if they've never been to community in person, like AA or anything, that they're not, I mean, because a lot of the struggle right now, from what I'm understanding, is it's hard for people to go from in-person meetings to online because they lose that in-person connection. But if you've never been to an AA meeting and you just get into an online community, you're probably going to have a vastly different feeling, and you're going to get a lot out of it. So I would even like search for online self-help communities and just join a few and just introduce yourself. Because here's the thing too, this is not going to be easy to hear. I don't like sugarcoating things, even though like sometimes I probably should. You got to choose your suck. And what I mean by that is that the feeling of emptiness and loneliness and all that, it sucks. And I've been there. And having the self-awareness and just being able just to be there is important, and it's valid. And that's like the first step, like I said, is acceptance. And it sucks to put yourself out there. It sucks to say, hey, I have a problem. Hey, I need help. Hey, can you help me? I've been drinking too much. But what also sucks is not doing anything about it. And 5, 6, 7 years from now, you look back and you're like, gosh, I wish I would have blank. You got to choose, which one do you want? Do you want the suck and the pain of putting yourself out there and obtaining grit and perseverance and developing character, of just keeping on trying to accomplish something, even though the odds are against you, even though you can't see light, even though people are doubting you, and not giving up? Do you want that route, or do you want the route of, well, it's going to suck, 5 years from now when I haven't done anything and I'm like, I'm not where I want to be.
Or dead.
Exactly.
I mean, I hate to be blunt too, but I mean, I have seen in my own family that where this disease of alcoholism can lead you, and it is not good. And so right now, especially, I think people have the opportunity to do a lot of self-reflection and ask themselves, what do they want to do with their life? Are they the best person in their relationship? Like, really ask yourself that question. Are you doing what you love? What's stopping you?
Right.
What really, because now is a time where I feel like the world has kind of a big pause button and we get to choose. Okay.
Yeah. And I think and I'm not saying it's not okay to just be still and accept where you are and just know that you're supposed to be in that place. I also know, though, that one of the biggest pivots for me, and anybody that I've ever interviewed who've struggled with addiction, is that it started with a decision to change. Like, you have to make that decision to change and be like, do I want my life to be like this forever? And it starts with that. And it doesn't have to be like going from 0 to 10 years in recovery in 3 days. It doesn't have to be from, going from being 100 pounds overweight to losing 50 pounds in a month. It just starts with one day. Like, ensure, set goals for a year from now, set goals for 6 months from now. But I tell you what, there's not one high achiever that I know that sets goals like that doesn't focus on the day. It doesn't focus on being present and doing the necessary things each day. Just take your day and then say, okay, like, what are some things, if I had my best friend or a loved one, my son, my daughter, somebody that you would hold dearly, what would I tell them to do? Because odds are you wouldn't steer them wrong. And I remember I forget who I was watching speak. This was like 7 years ago. And they said that, like, that when they talk about like advice, or that's exactly what I say to anybody. What would you tell your best friend? It's so simple, but so true. Like, what would you tell your best friend? And it changes the trajectory of your thoughts, because now you're looking at somebody else other than yourself, which is kind of messed up, that you're like, yeah, like, I would definitely tell my best friend to call somebody, stop using this, stop doing that. But for me, like, no way. Like, and so, I mean, and it was one of the best things I've learned through the years is that it doesn't matter who you were. Like, it doesn't, right? That part is done. It's there. It's always going to be there. What matters is who you are. And you're not like a fuck up. You just fucked up. Like, that's like kind of the way I tell people, because so many people label themselves based on past mistakes and failures. And they forget to label themselves in the person they want to be. And I think that's something people need to remember. And even in my own transformation, being where I am today and being on all these podcasts and in the media and everything I've done, writing books, like, That's all well and good. What drives me isn't that. That's a byproduct of me just being aligned with my purpose. What drives me is knowing that I've taken something that was very negative in my life and full of darkness, full of pain, full of sadness, full of sorrow. And I've turned it into something positive to be a light, not only to myself, but to others around me. And when you get to that point where you can look back and you can say, that's like what I'm doing, like adversity doesn't shake you because you know that things are happening for you. And even today, as I'm talking to you and, we're in a time of adversity, we're in a time of pandemic, like I'm still confident that like things are happening for a reason, whether it's me, getting back into certain things I've been doing or me, like whatever. Like before I never had that mentality. I was always like in the, oh my God, like that's just who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that answer helped. I kind of went,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just in awe of what you said because you have, sometimes I think when I've never met a strong person that's had an easy past. I'm sure you've heard that saying, but
oh,
you have gone through so much. So when you have adversity come your way now, you're like, okay, this is hard, but I have these tools to get through this. And I love the part you talked about the labels
yeah,
because I feel like other people can put labels on us. We can put labels on ourselves. And it's so important to put a positive label on ourselves. I did this event for, it was called Unleash. And we actually we like had our shirts off. We wrote on our backs labels that we were given as kids or that we've given ourselves as adults or whatever, and we wrote down 3 or 5 negative labels and then 5 positive ones. And then you take pictures and they smear the negative ones off and you say how it makes you feel. And I was shocked. I
yeah,
cried because I was like, wow, I had no idea that I still kind of carried those labels of shame around with me or broken or damaged goods. Like I still carried that with me. And it was a powerful thing, like transformation, to kind of let that go. And so I love the idea of putting a positive label on ourselves and doing it one day at a time. I always tell my clients, don't think about, yeah, you say you want to lose 50 pounds or you say you want to be able to bench press 150. I'm like, think of 1 pound at a time, one day at a time. If I thought of, I will never drink again, I probably wouldn't be able to stop drinking. But if I was like, okay, for today, I'm going to stop, then it made it so much easier.
well, and I think that's so intimidating to people is that like, I'm never going to drink again. Like that's very intimidating, especially if you're somebody who drank for like 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I remember I was in jail. My cellmate was like, he was like, I remember I was trying to lose weight and I was all excited. I was like, how long is it going to take me to, get rid of like my spare tire? How long is it going to take for me to lose like my triple chin, like all, like whatever it was. Right. And he's like, dude, how long you been beating your body up? 21 years. He's like, it's gonna take a long time, Doug. And I just was remembering like, he's right. And I think a lot of people, they forget that. And I'll first preface this. I'm a strong supporter of the AA community, NA community. I have a ton of friends who are in both. One of the things that I kind of, I don't want to say I have a beef with, because I don't, is the fact that you go in there and you're like, hey, my name's so-and-so and I'm an addict. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that obviously there's positive in that, and it reminds you of who you are. But I think for some people, it becomes this negative label.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, addiction was part of my life. And I will never forget that time when I was addicted. I'm not saying that part's erased, right? That I'm above it. I'm not. But I think when you can change the conversation of it being that was part of my life, not my life, that people can wrap their head around something different and
Mm-hmm.
being like, that's not my identity anymore. That's who I was. But who I'm going to become is something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recognize the person I used to be. I feel like I have I have different memories in my head where I look at that person and I was like, who the heck is that guy? But he's always there to remind me of how far I've come, and also like to count my blessings and know that like I'm grateful to be alive. Like I really am. Like I've lost a lot of friends, and even now, like just being somebody who's I get tons of messages on Instagram and emails, and I mean, not even just about my story, people like looking for help, and I try to get back to as many as I can, but it's often, I'm sure, as you know, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just grateful to be in a place where people are now looking to me for advice. And half the time it's like almost like the imposter syndrome. Like, why are they asking me? Like, what do I, it's like, what do I know? But at the same time, like, if I can do this, anyone can, because I literally was 21 years old, 21 jobs, a convicted felon, had no hope in myself, was fat physically and fat mentally, with like, I had so much weight to lose in my head of like the things and stories I was telling myself that anybody can do it. And what I love about your show is,
Such just a ray of sunshine. You are just the glimmer of hope, I think, that people need. That if you can get through that, anybody can get through that. I mean, talk about taking, you took your second chance and you're like, yeah, I am going to make something in my life. And really more than that, what you've done by turning it around and helping so many other people, that probably, do you feel like that helps you to continue on your path of sobriety and just fitness and by helping others?
yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to being of service and helping somebody. And not to say you don't have to take care of yourself, because you do, but you can. I think obviously taking care of other people along the way and helping is very therapeutic. And even for me, like writing my first book was therapeutic because I got something out there, and sharing my message on Instagram was very therapeutic. Not because I like hearing myself talk. It's more so because I'm like, all right, if I can like help just one person today,
Mm-hmm.
2 people, then I've won. And here's a perfect example. Like when, if you were in Starbucks, like, and this is something I have all my like a lot of my coaching clients do. I always have them be like, all right, one of your challenges is I want you to go into Starbucks, not now, but pre-COVID. And
Uh-huh.
I want you to buy the person in front of you or behind you their coffee, their order, whatever it is. And I want you to capture that feeling, that video of how you feel afterwards, and save it to your phone. Because I can guarantee you, if you're having a bad day, you will remember that. You will remember how that made you feel helping somebody else. And what it will also do is, if you're behind that person, it'll start a chain reaction. You're going to look at that person and be like, wow, that's a good idea. Like,
Yeah.
and then it's like they say, the old saying is, one candle can't light up an entire room, but one candle can light up 2 to 3 to 4. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm like
Well, you're doing it.
trying
You
to
are
spread
doing
the
it.
mission and being like, who wants to come with me? Who wants to help be that beacon of light and hope? And it's exhausting, it's tiring, and I probably run myself down too much doing it. But damn it, I have fun. Damn it.
Oh,
It feels great when people are like, hey, like, your story saved my life, or because of something you said, like I decided to quit drinking. And I get these messages often. And it's very humbling to me because I still am like a goofball. And I'm like, are they talking to me, or are they talking to the guy like, yep, yep,
oh.
so
Well, I mean, and you've got how many books? Two or three?
three.
Three. I haven't read the third. Oh my God. One book for me was hard. I've got the outline for the next book that's been sitting in my shelf right there for a while. And I'm like, oh, do I start it? Because it's a process. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And you have three.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. That is amazing.
got three. And then I got to kind of, I wrote actually Faith, Family, Fitness Volume 2. It's done. It's been done now for a while. I don't know when it's going to come out. I'm just kind of sitting on it, just because it's got to be like the timing. I mean, I'm really trying to focus more on my podcast now, and
Yeah, your podcast is doing amazing, and you have some amazing guests on your show.
Yeah,
And I was just grateful to be a guest on your show, and it was so much fun talking with you. What are your big goals for the future besides the podcast I know it takes a lot to do the podcast, but I know you're working with people. Are you going to be doing more speaking? There's so much speaking right now going online. Have you been doing that more? Or do you have any
I've had a
future
couple.
events?
I've had a couple opportunities to be online and speak to different. Like one was actually for Laura's recovery community, and then another one in a different group. And yeah, I mean, I would love to speak more. I'm definitely trying to get into more collegiate football teams. It's like I spoke to Clemson's football team last year, and that was one of the most rewarding things I've done is being able to go into a place like that and inspire college kids who were around the same age of when I was kind of doing all my goofy stuff. Speaking definitely, just, different things I have going on personally. I'd like to grow. Obviously just different business ventures, like I'm trying to, one of the things I love doing is I've been very blessed to be able to get on a lot of different podcasts and a lot of different shows. So just helping people who want to get on the podcast they listen to and helping them craft like their message, their story to be able to do that. As well as I've been doing a lot of like consulting for helping people build their business and then just, really
Well, that's amazing. It's just in you to help other people. And I noticed that about you from the first time we met. You're like, "Hey, maybe I could connect you with this person," or,
right.
and yeah. Yeah, connect me with Rich Roll. Hey Rich, I'm sure he's listening to this podcast right now. Love to have you on the show.
Yeah. I mean,
How was that being on his podcast? He's amazing.
he's a great guy. Yeah, it was definitely humbling. Flying out there. And then like I was a fan of the show. So I would like see him and he'd write like the name on the chalkboard, of the guests. And I just see all these guests he had on before me. And I was like, wow. And then I'm sitting there and it's like he just 2 hours of just him like just running through my story and everything was something. Um and I think at the end of the day, it's just something that um, was heartwarming for me. It was
Hmm.
heartwarming for me to be able to accomplish, some of the things I accomplished, and that podcast was
Well,
that.
y'all are both inspirations, and
Yeah,
to have both of you together, I'm sure the light and it was just amazing. You both are such both lights, big lights in the world. And I know I could talk to you all day, and I know you have to get going too. But before we go, I wanted people to know where they can get your book, where they can find you, and also just to be able to reach out to you. I know you have a ton of people that reach out, but for people that really resonate with your story and maybe want to connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
Instagram at Doug Bopst, and then um, www.dougbopst.com/gift. They can get my top 5 moves on how they can wake up and be the best version of themselves. And then all my books are on Amazon. And also just reach out and say what's up to me on Instagram. I mean, I'd love to help you in any way I can.
Oh, thank you. And you guys check out his podcast too. The Adversity
The
Advantage.
Adversity Advantage is on Spotify, iTunes, wherever podcasts are. And I'd um, I'd love to help you in any way I can.
Thank you so much, Doug. Thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing your story of just true resilience for sure. And I appreciate you, and I'm just grateful to call you my friend. So, and thank you. I hope we were supposed to do this in person. You were going to be out here in town in LA. So we'll still meet in person, maybe visit again and have you on the show again. But for now, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right.